Welcome back into HQ Spotlight. So our good friend Mike Renner, you've been all over the place. You've been podcasting, you've been on HQ earlier. We're stealing you for Spotlight because there's a lot to talk about. We're actually going to get into some teams that need some quarterbacks in 2025. But first, of course, this is the breaking news of the day. The Browns making the trade with the Bills getting Amari Cooper. How do you like the way this offense is now looking?
Yeah, I think this move had to be made because of what we saw the last 3 weeks. Teams realized that you could play man coverage against these guys and really put Josh Allen in a bind. Amari Cooper, yeah, he's lost a step. Yeah, he's not the guy he once was at over 30 years old, but he still can separate better than anyone the Bills have on their roster right now. So they're all in. They got a good enough roster to compete in the AFC. This just puts them a little bit over the top, gives them that answer when teams want to go match up one-on-one on the outside. We had Pete Prisco, Danny Cannell, and we were saying, are they pretenders or contenders for the Super Bowl? Where do you have the Bills? I think in the AFC right now, it's just going to be difficult. I like the Ravens better than them. We saw that a couple weeks ago. I like the Chiefs better than them right now. So they're behind the 8 ball, but when you have Josh Allen, you always have a window. So you might as well maximize it. And when it didn't cost that much to get a guy like Amari Cooper, yeah, it's worth the play. The wild stallion, as Pete Prisco called Josh Allen here. Let's bring in our good friend Ryan Wilson because we're going to talk about the team that Amari Cooper left. That would be the Browns. What we're going to do is both of you guys agreed that these teams pretty much need a quarterback in 2025. Let's start with the Browns. Tell us why. Ryan, I want some names from you because there's a lot of them coming up in next year's draft. Why is Deshaun Watson not worked out? It's not that hard to see why they need a quarterback. Deshaun Watson's been the worst quarterback in the NFL through 6 weeks, not just by this year, by the last 25 years in terms of EPA, the lowest over that time span. Yes, worse than Jamarcus Russell in his stint with the Raiders. So it's been rough. Obviously, I talked about the weapons on the outside not being as good, taking a step back, the offensive line being tough. But they need someone in that fold. You can't keep just sending Deshaun Watson out there with how he's playing right now. And they'll be drafting pretty highly at this rate. So, yeah, pretty obvious the Browns in the quarterback mix. Pretty high pick, Ryan.
Mike, you can't send somebody out there, but Kevin Stefanski insists on sending someone out there named the young man we're dealing with here who has been absolutely terrible. Mike laid out the reasons why. But here's where I'm going here. Let's go with Cam Ward. Now, Cam Ward isn't my QB1, guys, but here's the thing. I'm thinking about fit. And fit certainly matters when you talk about these young quarterbacks. And if Kevin Stefanski can weather this storm with Deshaun Watson and hang around and keep his job, and good Lord, who knows if that's going to happen. But if he's around a year from now, he is really good at coordinating up offenses and getting the most out of his players, not named Deshaun Watson. And Cam, and Mike's talking about this as well, has been really special this year and proved a lot of people wrong. He's gotten a lot better as the season progresses. And I think if he continues down that path, guys, he'll be a first-round pick. The only question becomes how high will he go? And again, I think he's a great fit in Cleveland under the perfect circumstances. That sounds like a crazy thing to say about Cleveland Browns, but fingers crossed, hope it happens.
Look, for Kevin Stefanski, I mean, we would hope that the guy who was named Coach of the Year just a year ago was able to keep this job. We know it's been rough for the Browns. Let's go on to another team, and you got to direct this to Pete Prisco because this is our one guy at this station who is high on Will Levis. Do the Titans need to draft a quarterback in 2025? I think they're going to have to. I don't see this turning around for Levis just based off what I've seen on tape because he keeps turning the football over, man. Every single game, even when he gets hurt like 5 plays into the game, he still manages to throw an interception. He's thrown one every single game. Fumbling the football, pocket presence. We just need to see steps forward. Now, we've seen some. His accuracy is actually a lot improved over a year ago. He hasn't missed that many throws from a pure accuracy perspective. But those things I talked about, just the risk level that he's willing to take on is too much for the NFL right now. So maybe we see improvement over the course of the season. But if we don't, yeah, they have to move on from Will Levis at this point.
The most Will Levis thing ever is Mike Renner saying that he's improved his accuracy, and the graphics people show him throwing an interception, one of the worst interceptions we've seen last week anyway. He has a lot that aren't great. And Mike laid out the reasons why. Physically, he looks the part. Mentally, it feels like he's not there, and then the question becomes, does he ever get there? All that said, who's tough physically and mentally? I mean, this guy takes a beating each and every week, and he pops right back up and makes big plays. How about Shedeur Sanders? Nashville ain't Las Vegas in terms of doing the old watch dance, but it certainly feels like not a bad consolation prize. I think Brian Callahan wants to have this offense run a certain way, and he wants to run a certain way, not the way that Will Levis is running it. We know his dad, Bill Callahan's going to get that offensive line where it needs to be. Lean on the running game. The defense is improving, and I think with someone like Shedeur Sanders, he can come in there and orchestrate that offense at a different level. Does he make mistakes? Sure. Does he play out of structure? Absolutely. But I think you can see the improvement, and have you seen it since he came from Jackson State to year 1 to year 2 of Colorado? I think that could happen in Tennessee, who currently have a top 10 pick for a reason. Their quarterback hasn't played very well.
Let's go to the Panthers. Obviously, the Panthers were the team that took Bryce Young #1 overall. Obviously, they've relinquished that, turning to Andy Dalton a couple weeks ago there. Do they turn to the draft? I mean, would you look elsewhere considering what you picked already?
They have to go draft at this point. And yeah, it's only 2 years after you had the #1 overall pick and you kind of tab Bryce Young as your guy. But in the NFL, if it doesn't work out, you gotta forget about it. It's a sunk cost. You got to go back, get on the horse, and draft another guy, especially considering where they'll be drafting. At this rate, it's going to be #1 or #2, right? I know they drafted #1 last year and didn't have their pick, but it's going to be a very high pick. So they may have the pick of the litter here. And in this class, I think there will be guys who will separate themselves to be that #1, #2 worthy pick when it's all said and done by the end of the season. So when that's the case, it's not worth trading that away and just loading up on picks and praying Bryce Young figures it out or praying that a veteran quarterback picks you later. No, get back on there and draft one of the guys in this class.
Fit matters so much, and I'm going to keep saying that until I believe it, because I make mistakes in terms of this draft process as well. Bryce Young was certainly one of them. The most hilarious thing that could possibly happen is that they re-sign Sam Darnold after his contract's up because he was so good in Minnesota. Barring that, I think what you do in terms of fit that makes the most sense in terms of quarterback that is most QB ready to go into a situation that ain't great, I'm going with Carson Beck out of Georgia. And I know, Mike, we've talked about this last week on the podcast, did not play well in that Alabama game in the first quarter. The last 10 quarters, he's looked a lot like the quarterback that NFL teams wanted to see throughout the process. And I think he's the most ready to come in and contribute. Does he have the highest ceiling? Absolutely not. But he might have the highest floor. And when you're going to a situation that ain't perfect, you're not going, for example, Caleb Williams to the Bears where things around you are a little better. I think he might have the best chance for early success. We know Dave Canales' record with these young QBs. I like the idea of him going there if he continues to play like he's played these last 10 quarters after that really tough first half against the Crimson Tide.
The Panthers have obviously looked to the draft before for a quarterback. The Raiders, not so much. Correct me if I'm wrong, because, I mean, they didn't take somebody high. I don't think there was anybody further down in the draft that they took. Obviously, they've already made changes between Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. Do they turn to the draft finally to find their guy?
I think they have to. And last time they went fairly high, it was Derek Carr, and he was a second rounder. They haven't had that guy in the first round. And I think it's time. I mean, you kind of did a franchise reset this offseason. They were in a weird cap space, had to do a number of different moves. This is now the time. You're going to give Aiden O'Connell the next few starts to see what he can be. But I think we've seen enough at this point that his high end is not getting you to the promised land. It's not getting you to compete with Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes in that division. So if you're the Raiders, you got to take a big swing of the bat if you ever want to win the AFC West.
Yeah, 100%. And I do wonder at times as I watch week in and week out if the Raiders wish they had traded up to get one of those 6 quarterbacks that went in the top 12. They picked 13th, took Brock Bowers. That was a grand slam, but he just doesn't play quarterback, unfortunately. So let's spice things up in Vegas. If Shadur Sanders isn't going to be there, let's go with Jalen Milroe, who is insanely athletic. He'd be the best athlete on the field the moment he sets on there. Has a huge arm, and he has gotten better this year under Kalen DeBoer, and that's the critical part. Last year, at times, he was unplayable, and he did get benched. Bounced back. He's a great leader. We talked to Terry and Arnold about this in the Combine, how he stood up and took responsibility and got better and learned from it. And this year, he's gotten better each and every week, and I think Kalen DeBoer has a lot to do with that. Had the success with Michael Penix Jr. at Washington, and I think we're going to continue to see Jalen Milroe get better. Is he a first-round pick right now? It's close, probably not. You're going on projection, but he has a chance to get into that conversation if he keeps playing well, keeps winning with his legs, which you know he can do, and keeps throwing the ball accurately on those intermediate and deep balls, which we've seen a lot more of this year.
Ryan, let me ask you this when it comes to the draft. Is there a sneaky NFL team that we don't necessarily think would be drafting a quarterback, like the Packers did a couple years ago, that could potentially be diving into the pool?
I mean, the Falcons last year was the one, right? At 8, they took Michael Penix Jr. I'll give you some names. I won't say if producer Noah made me mention these teams. So and try not to laugh as I say them. The 49ers and Brock Purdy. Come on, let's be real. They're going to sign Brock Purdy. Is he a system quarterback? I don't think so. Are you going to pay him $60 million a year? Maybe you have to. The Rams are a more reasonable team to think about, right? We don't know what Matthew Stafford's going to do there. One of the names that I love, and I think that Mike had him in his first round this week as well, Garrett Nussmeier as a potential late first-round guy. He can sling it. He's only going to get better at it. LSU. The Jets make sense, of course, because I don't know if Aaron Rodgers and or Devontae Adams will be around next year. I would love to see Shadur in New York. And finally, the Steelers. 2 quarterbacks on 1-year deals. We've seen Justin Fields be okay. Russ Wilson might get a chance to play. I would love someone like the Nuss Bus in Pittsburgh. He should be around there at the end of round 1 as well, because as I mentioned, he can sling it. They have a running game, and that defense can certainly help out a young quarterback.
Out of those 4 teams, any one of them that you think could be sneaky?
I kind of like the 49ers, just because they're so expensive as a roster otherwise, and we've seen, Brock Purdy's great. I think he's made a big leap this year. But if you're paying him $60 million, everything else there doesn't start to work anymore. So resetting, we've seen what Kyle Shanahan could do at the quarterback position. And in this class, he mentioned Garrett Nussmeier. He's a guy who very well could be there at the back end of round 1 because he doesn't have the high-end tools, but he's an NFL-ready sort of guy that if you wanted to, trade Brock Purdy or tag and trade him at the end of his rookie deal, he could be a guy stepping right away and run that offense.
And maybe you could find a guy, again, at the very bottom of the draft. Not really sure. Ryan Wilson, Mike Renner, we appreciate it here. With the first pick, that is the podcast to which Ryan Wilson belongs to, along with Rick Spielman. Hard to believe we're already talking about the draft, but there are so many good players heading into it next season, next year, I should say. Pushing the pile, what have you got coming up with you guys?
Ooh, we got a mailbag tomorrow.
Oh, I like that. All right, I'm going to throw in a question. I don't know what's going to be.
Please do.